Welcome to the Elevated Healthy channel, where we're bringing you content for your conscience that makes much sense. I am your host, Elevated Healthy. Today, we're going to dive into part 4 of Massacres in U.S. History live. Untold U.S. Massacres they forget hidden history. Before we get started, turn y'all up for a little minute. This song is called United Lightning by No 27. New age, what we is so brave. So this right is like it's so brave. And let the media about how we work for the time to go and get you what you need. Every day, man, that's consistency. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the best. And I do it with. Look at me now, dog. Everything came to fruition. Cause every day add to percentages until you came home. Now I'm sitting better down, seven man, like it's supposed to. Like this, take a trip to Memphis. Off that get where. Shout out DJ Mac, Memphis. You know what's up. Yeah, now I'm hitting that motherfucker. Little rock, yo, man. Now motherfucker swing 30, man. To the Dallas Day. Oh, cliff, man, shit, dog. Yeah, take house. Yeah, get it easy, man, shit. Hustling on, energize. No batteries in the back, dog. Should I use my mind? That's why I motherfucker pretty fine. Yeah, man, dust that's dirt all dime. Now motherfucker is shine, man. That's why I'm running. Feel good, man. That metronome that's brought me on time for this. Yeah, man, shit. So legitimate on my pilgrimage, where it feels good, your village. And I just pull up, what? Right? To yo, yeah, money, power, respect, man. That's my yeah, cool, yes. How you know, rap, so ferocious, so yeah, man, cause commotion, push and control. And it's all good, I mean, yeah, right, united, yeah. You're striking, man, shit, yeah, fast, so lightning. All right, let's get it going, man. We're going to start off with December 7th, 1874, Vicksburg Massacre. Time periods 1865, the African American Reconstruction, Democracy and Citizenship, Racism, and Racial Identity. On December 7th, 1874, the Reconstruction era, Vicksburg Massacre occurred in Mississippi, with estimates ranging from 75 to 300 African Americans killed. Whites attacked black citizens who had organized to defend Peter Crosby, formerly enslaved and a veteran of the Union Army. Crosby had been forced to resign from his elected role as sheriff. Read a detailed description of the massacre in an excerpt from A Nation Under Our Feet: Black Political Struggles in the Rural South from Slavery to the Great Migration by Teach Reconstruction Campaign advisor and historian Stephen Hunn. Most important was the emergence of the White League and of the White Line movement more generally in Louisiana and Mississippi, committed to drawing the racial line in politics and inviting all white men without regard to former party affiliations to unite. The League was first organized in Opelousas in late April and then spread very rapidly. It clearly built on foundations established by the Klan and the Knights of the White Camellia. A Union Army commander regarded the League as a second edition of the White Camellia campaign of 1868, but was even more directly aligned with the Democratic Party. Indeed, leagues were often little more than local Democratic clubs converted into paramilitary companies. If the Democratic Party is arrayed against the Negro and the Republicans, the Opelousas Courier proclaimed, It becomes a white league, and no one can object to its efficient organization. White leaguers surely recognized that the federal government was losing interest in interfering in Southern politics and Southern regimes by military means. They also responded to the growing assertiveness of African Americans within the Republican Party, which showed itself in the rising incidence of black office holding. By that time, two white line counterparts in Vicksburg, Mississippi, had demonstrated how paramilitary mobilization and very definite intimidation could bring electoral success, even where black voters held decided numerical sway. I feel like I read this one. We're gonna go to Clinton, Mississippi. September 4th, 1875, Clinton, Mississippi massacre. The Reconstruction era Clinton massacre began on September 4th, 1875, in the small town of Clinton, Mississippi, at a Republican rally to introduce the party's candidates who were running for political office in the upcoming November elections. The immediate death toll included five African American and three white men. Over the next several days, an estimated 50 African Americans were killed. Over 1,500 black Republicans and their families gathered on the grounds of the former Moss Hill plantation for a barbecue and political rally. Approximately 100 whites also attended, included a few Democrats from the nearby town of Raymond. While a Republican was giving a speech, shots was fired. When the gunfire ended, a total of five African Americans, including two children and three white people, were dead, and nearly 30 others were wounded. The following days were marked by violence and bloodshed as the white mob indiscriminately shot and killed nearly 50 African Americans in Clinton and the surrounding area. In addition, the white mob murdered a white schoolteacher working in the African American community. Although Governor Ames requested federal troops to assist in restoring order, President Ulysses Grant denied the request on September 14 and adopted a policy of non intervention, leaving Ames and local black and white Republicans without protection. Description above from blackpast.org by Sharon Sanders, Alcorn State University. Learn more from the detailed account in the Clinton riot of 1875, From Riot to Massacre, Mississippi Historical Society. The article includes testimonies from the time and recent efforts by the town to recognize and teach about the history. Also, see Clinton Massacre leaves more than 20 blacks dead in Mississippi, Equal Justice Initiative. Teach about the Reconstruction era and the long history of struggle for voting rights. The resources listed below. Da, 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 da. September 4th, 1875, Clinton, Mississippi. Right? Note that. All right, now we're moving on to July 8th, 1876, the Hamburg Massacre. July 8th, 1876, Hamburg Massacre on July 4th, 1876. In the midst of a heated Reconstruction era local election season, a black militia was engaged in military exercise when two white farmers attempted to drive through. Although the farmers got through the military formation after an initial argument, this event provided the excuse sought by whites to suppress black voting through violence. On July 6th, in a courtroom, the farmers charged the militia with obstructing the road. The case was postponed to July 8th, by which time more than 100 white men from local counties had gathered in town armed with weapons. The African Americans attempted to flee, but 25 men were captured and six were murdered. Read more about the Hamburg Massacre and Black at blackpast.org. Also, read an extraordinary story by the South Carolina Citizen History about the historic markers for the Hamburg Massacre about Senator Ben Tillman, who led the mob attack. Another massacre in this time of terror during the 1876 gubernatorial campaign was the Ellerton riot, when armed groups of white supremacists rampaged. with the excuse of rumors of black on white crime in Ellerton, South Carolina. No African Americans were safe, and accounts indicate that field crews, families at home, evening political meetings, and even church gatherings were targets of white assailants. The human cost was high. At least two whites were dead, with three wounded, while estimates of the death toll among African Americans ranged from 30 to more than 100. Among the dead was Black State Legislator Simone Coker, who was shot in the head while praying for mercy. One of the leaders present at Coker's murder became South Carolina's governor and longtime U.S. Senator. His name was Benjamin Tillman. Only the intervention of the U.S. Army ended the killing spree, excerpted and adapted from the South Carolina Encyclopedia. Note that the plaque picture on this page identifies political parties. For further context regarding the political realignment that occurred in the 20th century, leading the vast majority of African Americans to change party identification from Republican to Democrat, visit the History, Art, and Archives of the U.S. House of Representatives. Read more about about massacres in U.S. history. Learn more in the Zinn Education Project National Report, Erasing the Black Freedom Struggle, how state standards fail to teach the truth about Reconstruction, and find teaching resources on Reconstruction below. All right, let's read this historical marker. Erected by the Heritage Society of North Augusta in 2010, Larry Gleason photographer. The Hamburg Massacre. The Hamburg Massacre, which occurred nearby on July 8, 1876, was one of the most notable incidents of racial and political violence in South Carolina during Reconstruction. White Democrats across the state organized rifle clubs to intimidate the black and white Republicans during the gubernatorial election of 1876. Clashes between groups of armed men were frequent, and in some cases, even including the militia. July 8th, 1876, Hamburg Massacre. All right. November 3rd, 1883, Danville Riot. November 3rd, 1883, Danville Riot, time periods 1877. The Danville Riot occurred on November 3rd, 1883. White supremacists resented the biracial Readjuster Party, which controlled the city council seats in the majority African American city of Danville, Virginia in 1882. An attack by white supremacists left four black and one white man dead. In the aftermath, armed white men patrolled the streets of the town, preventing most African Americans from voting and allowing the Democratic Party to regain political power in the town. Read more in the Encyclopedia Virginia. All right. Now we are September 2nd, Rock Springs Massacre. White coal miners in Rock Springs, Wyoming, brutally attacked Chinese workers. September 7, 1885, Rock Springs Massacre, time periods 1877. Themes: Asian American immigration, labor, racism, and racial identity. Massacre of Chinese immigrants at Rock Springs, Wyoming, 1885. Source: Harper's Weekly. On September 2nd, 1885, 150 white coal miners in Rock Springs, Wyoming, brutally attacked the Chinese workers, killing 28, wounding 15 others, and driving several hundred more out of town. Tom Rhea writes in the Rock Springs Massacre at the Wyoming State Historical Society website, on the morning of September 2nd, 1885, a fight broke out between white and Chinese miners in the number 6 mine in Rock Springs. Whites fatally wounded the Chinese miner with blows of a pick to the skull. A second Chinese was badly beaten. Finally, a foreman arrived and ended the violence. But instead of going back to work, the white miners went home and fetched guns, hatchets, knives, and clubs. In Chinatown, it was a Chinese holiday. Many other miners stayed home from work and were unaware of what was developing. Shortly after noon, between 100 and 150 armed white men, mostly miners and railroad workers, convened again at the railroad tracks near the number 6 mine. Many women and even children joined them. About 2 in the afternoon, the mob divided. Half moved toward Chinatown across a plank bridge over Bitter Creek. Others approached by the railroad bridge, leaving some behind at both bridges to prevent any non whites from leaving. Still others walked up the hill toward the number 3 mine, north, and on the other side of the tracks from Chinatown. Chinatown was nearly surrounded. In the buildings at the number 3 mine, white men shot Chinese workers, killing several. The mob moved into Chinatown from 3 directions, pulling some Chinese men from their homes and shooting others as they came into the street. Most fled, dashing through the creek, along the tracks or up the steep bluffs and out of the hills beyond. A few ran straight for the mob and met their deaths. White women took part in the killing too. The mob turned back through Chinatown, looting the shacks and houses, and then setting them on fire. More Chinese women, more Chinese were driven out of hiding by the flames and were killed in the streets. Others burned to death in their cellars. Still others died that night out on the hills and prairies from thirst, the cold, and their wounds. Continue reading The Rock Springs Massacre by Tom Ria. Learn more from Sundown Towns, A Hidden Dimension of American Racism by James W. Lowen. Read Burning Tulsa, The Legacy of Black Dispossession, an article on teaching students about the legacy of dispossession when people of color are forced from their homes, land, and or employment. All right. So this is September 2nd, 1885, Rock Springs Massacre that I just read. We are at March 17, 1886. Thank y'all for jumping in and watching this, man. Appreciate it. Yeah. Hope y'all having a good day. For sure, for sure. March 17, 1886, Carroll County Courthouse Massacre. Time period 1877. African American Reconstruction. Carroll County Courthouse, Carrollton, Mississippi. Carroll County Courthouse, Carrollton, Mississippi, 1878. Source Courthouse History. Sharon Sanders writes at Black Pass, the Carroll County Courthouse Massacre occurred on March 17, 1886 in Carrollton, the county seat of Carroll County, Mississippi. An incident from earlier in the year led to the bloodshed in March that left 23 people dead. The events leading up to the massacre began in January when brothers Ed and Charlie Brown, who were part Native American and black, spilled molasses they were delivering to a saloon on a white man named Robert Moore. The matter was quickly resolved without incident after Moore confronted the Brown brothers. The next month, Moore mentioned the incident to his friends James Liddell, a Carrollton attorney, and Greenwood newspaper editor, who decided to handle the matter on his own. On February 12, 1886, Liddell confronted the Brown brothers and accused them of intentionally spilling the molasses on Moore. An argument ensued, but bystanders intervened before the confrontation became physical. Later that evening, Liddell confronted the brothers a second time after he heard they were talking negatively about him. The time, this time, the argument ended with shots fired and all 3 men wounded, though not seriously. Although no one knows who fired the first shot, the Brown brothers pressed charges against Liddell for attempted murder. The whites in Carrollton were not pleased that a black person had the audacity to charge a white person with a crime. On March 17, 1886, the day of the trial, over 50 armed white men stormed the courtroom and opened fire on the Brown brothers and the other blacks in attendance. Some blacks tried to escape by jumping out of the second floor windows but were shot by armed men waiting outside the courthouse. Both Brown brothers were killed, along with 21 other blacks during the massacre. It is unknown how many others died later from bullet wounds. All victims of the Carroll County Massacre were black. No whites were injured. Read more about the Carroll County Courthouse Massacre at Black Pass. March 17, 1886, Carroll County Courthouse Massacre. All right, May 27, 1887, massacres at Hills Canyon. According to an article written by Connie Horton for Oregon Public Broadcasting on May 27, 1887, a gang of horse thieves gunned down more than 30 Chinese gold miners on the Snake River in the Hills Canyon. While one person ultimately confessed to the brutal murders, no one was ever found guilty. The article quotes R. Gregory Noakes, author of Massacred for Gold, The Chinese in Hills Canyon, as calling the Hills Canyon Massacre the worst massacre of Chinese people by whites in the United States. It was really an act of savage racial hatred. The main motive of the killers was to go and kill these Chinese. Following the discovery of gold in California and the subsequent gold rush in 1849, Chinese laborers came to the West Coast to search for gold, work on the railroads, and raise their families. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 barred Chinese laborers from entering the country, making it difficult for Chinese residents to gain citizenship or legal rights. Helmy Horton writes, and Massacre at Hell's Canyon. Throughout the 1880s, Chinese immigrants watched their communities be burned, attacked, and sometimes destroyed by racist mobs. In some places, Chinese were lynched or shot, while others were run out of town. They almost had no legal rights to defend themselves. All right. It's a memorial plaque to those massacred on May 27, 1887, source public domain, dedicated June 22nd, 2012. Chinese Massacre Cove, site of the 1887 massacre, as many as 34 Chinese gold miners. No one was held accountable. Selman, Wapa, Tamawan, Tuko, Akpaan, 1887, Wiwa Pika Ya Awanet, Mita A Di Wa Et Ti Alet, Selman Max Max Get Where P A O I with it you. This is it. What system? Who? Hey, I don't know if I read it right, but I gave it a shot. In 2005, the U.S. Board of Geographic Names officially renamed the area where the massacre happened as Chinese Massacre Cove. Watch Massacre at Hell's Canyon, a 2017 video by Oregon Public Broadcasting below. A Mandarin language version of the program is available too. All right. So that is May 27, 1887, Massacres at Hell's Canyon. November 23rd, 1887, Thibodaux Massacre. Between 30 to 60 striking black Louisiana sugarcane workers were massacred. On November 23rd, 1887, the Louisiana militia, aided by bands of prominent white citizens, shot and killed 30 to 60 unarmed striking black sugar workers in what became known as the Thibodaux Massacre. Black Louisiana sugarcane workers, in cooperation with the racially integrated Knights of Labor, had gone on strike at the beginning of November in 1887 over their meager pay issued in scrip, not cash. The scrip was redeemable only at the company store where excessive prices were charged. Much of this history was documented through research by the John DeSantis, author of the Thibodaux Massacre History Press. The story of how he learned of and found accounts of the massacre in pension records is a history lesson in and of itself. Cutting sugar cane in Louisiana between 1880 to 1897. Click photo for more information. Source Library of Congress. An article in the Smithsonian Magazine describes the conditions at the time. Years after the 13th Amendment brought freedom, cane cutters, working lives were already barely distinguishable from slavery, argues journalist and author John DeSantis. With no land to own or rent, workers and their families lived in old slave cabins. They toiled in gangs, just like their ancestors, and had for nearly a century. Growers gave workers meals but paid famine wages of as little as 42 cents a day, 91 cents per hour in today's money for a 12-hour shift. This was part of the violent end to the Reconstruction era of the United States. It was also a devastating attack on organized labor, as explained in the Smithsonian Magazine. The Union died with the strikers, and the assassins went unpunished. There was no federal inquiry, and even the coroner's inquest refused to point a finger at the murderers. Sugar planter Andrew Price was among the attackers that morning. He won a seat in Congress the next year. Southern black farm workers would not attempt to unionize again until the 1930s, when the Southern Tent Farmers Union attracted both white and African American members, but it too was met by a violent racist backlash. The struggle for Southern unions continued into the Civil Rights era. On the night before he was assassinated in Memphis, Martin Luther King Jr. gave a speech supporting striking sanitation workers. He urged his audience to give ourselves to this struggle until the end. You may not be on strike, but either we go up together or we go down together. To learn more, we recommend the Thibodaux Massacre, Racial Violence in the 1887 Sugarcane Labor Strike by John DeSantis, History Press 2016, The Thibodaux Massacre, 1887, a 2007 article on libcom.org by Stephen Klebert. The Thibodaux Massacre left 60 African Americans dead and spelled the end of unionized farm labor in the South for decades. A November 27 Smithsonian Magazine article by Calvin Schermerhorn. Thibodaux, the story of the Thibodaux Massacre, race rioting, resilience documentary, film, and production. Thibodaux is one of countless massacres in U.S. history. Learn about more on the Zinn Education Project list of selected massacres in U.S. history. Also, read our report on the teaching about Reconstruction. So, I want y'all to look at this right here. You see this picture? Fast forward to now, 2025. What are you seeing on TV? Shortages, farm work. You know what I'm saying? These people were agriculturalists, but yet were treated like minimalists. You wonder why there's no farmers in America because you treated them like this. Hold on. You massacred them and you paid them in today's wages 92 cents, 42 cents back in that era. Who can live off that, right? So there's where your shortages of farmers at right there. All right, let's keep it going. December 29th, 1890, Wounded Knee Massacre. On December 29th, 1890, a Lakota encampment on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation was attacked by the U.S. Army, and close to 300 Native Americans were murdered near Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota. Beginning on February 27, 1973, 83 years later, Wounded Knee was the site of a 71-day standoff between the American Indian Movement and the federal law enforcement officials. The We Remember poster is by Bruce Carter and archived at the Library of Congress. Episode 5 from the excellent documentary We Shall Remain includes Wounded Knee history. Listen to the song Wounded Knee by Joe Della Filippo and performed by R.J. Phillips Band, a group of Baltimore studio musicians. Watch a video of the song below. Below are resources on Native American history and contemporary issues for teaching outside of the textbook. Yeah. So these are resources right here for y'all to do some research. December 29th, 1890, Wounded Knee Massacre. All right. We're keeping it going, man. Appreciate y'all for dropping in, checking out the live. We're going over the massacres. And then I'm picking up right here at August 5th, 1896, Polk County Massacres. White workers murdered black workers in Arkansas who were coming to work on the railways. On August 5th, 1896, white workers attacked black workers in Arkansas who were coming to work on the Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Gulf Railway. As a result, 3 African Americans were killed and 8 wounded. This was part of a pattern of labor related white supremacist terrorism that was sweeping Arkansas at the time. There were continued attempts by white people to drive African Americans from the Mena and Polk County area. Nonetheless, African Americans established a small black community named Little Africa just east of town. This was followed by continued attacks and a lynching in 1901. Excerpted from and continue reading at the Encyclopedia of Arkansas. Learn more. Racial Cleansing in Arkansas, 1883 to 1924. Politics, Land, Labor, and Criminality by Guy Lancaster. Sundown Towns by James Lowen. Burning Tulsa, The Legacy of Black Dispossession, a lesson on teaching about the history and legacy of African Americans being forcibly denied access to their land, employment, housing, and more. Oh, yeah. That's why reparations is overdue. All right, September 10th, 1897, Latimer Massacre. On September 10th, 1897, 19 mine workers were killed and dozens were wounded in the Latimer Massacre. A strike began weeks prior as miners from eastern Pennsylvania protested extremely dangerous working conditions, unpaid overtime in the company's store. Latimer Massacre. Here on September 10th, 1897, nearly 400 immigrant coal miners on strike were met and fired upon by sheriff deputies. Unarmed, they were marching from Hardwood to Latimer in support of higher wages and more equitable working conditions. 19 of the marchers were killed and 38 were wounded. This was one of the most serious acts of violence in American labor history. About 400 miners, mostly immigrants, began an unarmed, peaceful march to Latimer to support the newly formed United Mine Workers there. When they arrived, Luzerne County Sheriff James Martin and his deputies opened fire on the men and boys. Paul A. Shackle, author of Remembering Latimer, Labor, Migration, and Race in Pennsylvania, Anthracite Country, writes in Why Don't More Americans Remember the 1897 Massacre of Pennsylvania Coal Miners? The slain strikers were buried in 4 different Hazleton cemeteries with great ceremony, most in paupers' graves. As many as 8,000 people participated in the funeral ceremonies and processions. A Polish newspaper, which was published in Scranton, memorialized the men with a rephrasing of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. For those who died in Latimer, it wrote, May their death not be in vain. May they become the patron saints of the working people in America. Luzerne County Sheriff James Martin and his deputies were tried in February 1898 for killing one striker, but were found innocent after defense attorneys characterized the miners as invaders from the steppes of Hungary who had come to America to destroy peace and liberty. Read more in That Day in Latimer and Counterpunch. This article is by Lynn Sunderland Jaskiwiak, a writer and artist living in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Her great grandfather, Clements Platek, was one of 19 miners murdered on September 10th, 1987, in Latimer, Pennsylvania. Jasquiat, and Stephen Carlson wrote the song below about the Latimer Massacre. So that is the September 10th, 1897 Latimer Massacre. November 10th, 1898, Wilmington Massacre. On November 10th, 1898, white supremacists murdered African Americans in Wilmington, North Carolina, and deposed the elected Reconstruction era government in a coup d'etat. It was the morning of November 10th, 1898, in Wilmington, North Carolina, and the fire was the beginning of an assault that took place 7 blocks east of the Cape Fear River, about 10 miles inland from the Atlantic Ocean. By sundown, Alex Manley's newspaper, the Daily Record, had been torched. As many as 60 people had been murdered, and the local government that was elected 2 days prior had been overthrown and replaced by white supremacists. For all the violent moments in United States history, the mob's gruesome attack was unique. It was the only coup d'etat ever to take place on American soil. Ah, until when? Lost in the fire that destroyed the Daily Record were the lives of black citizens and the spirit of a thriving black community, and also the most promising effort in the South to build racial solidarity. Adrienne LaFranc and Von Newkirk in The Lost History of an American Coup d'etat. Let's read this landmark here. Wilmington Coup. Armed white mob met at Armory here, November 10th, 1898. March 6th, blocks and burned office of Daily Record, black owned newspaper. Violence left untold members of African Americans dead, led to overthrow of city government and installation of coup leader as mayor. Was part of a statewide political campaign based on calls for white supremacy and the exploitation of racial prejudice. So I don't want to hear nobody say nothing about black people begging or something. Because you just read that they had a whole town and it was taken over. Okay. Marked and installed in 2019. Photo by Vince Winkle, WHQR News. Background. Before the violence, this port city on the Cape Fear River was remarkably integrated. 3 out of the 10 aldermen were African Americans, and black people worked as policemen, firemen, and magistrates. Democrats, the party of Confederacy, vowed to end this Negro domination in 1898. State legislative elections. Their strategy was to enlist men who can write, white journalists and cartoonists, men who can speak, white supremacists who whipped up emotions at rallies, and men who could ride, the Ku Klux Klan like red shirts who were basically armed ruffians on horseback. The white supremacists used an editorial by Alex Manley, the editor of Wilmington's black newspaper, the Daily Record, to stir a firestorm at the time of the elections. The editorial responded to a speech by Georgia socialite who promoted lynching as a method to protect women's dearest possession from the ravening human beast. Manley condemned lynching and pointed out the hypocrisy of describing black men as big, burly black brutes, when in reality it was white men who regularly raped black women with impunity. He added that some relations between the races were consensual. White supremacist rallies kept white outrage at the editorial at a fever pitch. Former Confederate Colonel Alfred Waddell gave a speech suggesting that white citizens should choke the Cape Fear River with carcasses, if necessary, to keep African Americans from the polls. On election day, the red shirts patrolled black neighborhoods with guns. Democrats won every seat, but these were state legislative seats. African Americans still maintained power in Wilmington city government. Some 800 white citizens led by Waddell met at the county courthouse and produced the White Declaration of Independence, which stated, "We, the undersigned citizens, do hereby declare that we will no longer be ruled and never again be ruled by men of African origin. The following day, November 10th, Waddell led a mob of 2,000 armed men to the Daily Record and burned the building to the ground. Talk about BLM, burn, loot, murder, armed rioters in front of destroyed press building. Look at it. Burn, loot, murder, BLM. Wilmington, North Carolina, man, prosperous town. People just trying to live. They didn't like that Native Black Americans were in governmental seats. And look, there it is. Smile. Probably put this on a postcard and sent it out to all their friends and family. Armed rioters, you see what it says? In front of destroyed press building. And they smiling about it. Why y'all don't teach this in your history books? Y'all call this critical race theory, but they smiling in the picture. They proud about that. Why won't you be proud to teach this? Hmm? Don't hide this. Put it out there, man. They smiling about this. They're very proud. I think there's even a uniformed officer in there too. Okay, I thought so. Rumors tore through the black neighborhoods. The tinderbox ignited at the corner of 4th and Harnett, where African Americans at Walker's grocery store faced off against white men at Brungy's saloon. A shot was fired and someone yelled, "White man killed." Gunfire erupted. Unarmed black men scattered in all directions and were gunned down. Violence quickly spread. The Wilmington Light Infantry, the white government union, and the red shirts poured into the black neighborhoods with rifles, revolvers, and a Gatling gun. Wilmington Light Infantry machine gun crew. You know, see this? They're very proud of this. As bullets were still flying, Waddell threw out the democratically elected alderman and installed his own. This was nothing less than a coup d'etat, the hand-picked men elected by Waddell mayor. Many black leaders were jailed for their own safety and then forcibly marched to the train station under military escort and sent out of town. After the massacre, thousands of black citizens fled. In 1900, the North Carolina legislature effectively stripped African Americans of the vote through the grandfather clause and ushered in the worst of Jim Crow laws. The background text is adapted from a description by Barbara Wright, author of Crow, a book of historical fiction from grade 7 plus about the Wilmington Massacre. Other books of historical fiction about the massacre are Cape Fear Rising by Philip Gerard and A Moment in the Sun by John Sayers. American Coup, Wilmington, 1898, tells the story of how self-described white supremacists used intimidation and violence to destroy black political and economic power and overthrow Wilmington's democratically elected, multiracial Reconstruction era government. Black residents were murdered and thousands were banished. The story of what happened in Wilmington was suppressed for decades until descendants and scholars began to investigate. Today, many of those descendants, black and white, seek the truth about this intentionally buried history. The film broadcast premiere is on November 12th when it was simultaneously streamed on all PBS branded platforms, including Pt.4 and PBS app. So, yeah, the Wilmington Massacre. Has anyone ever heard about this massacre here? Anyone? Wilmington was a prominent town for Native Black Americans, and they had gubernatorial seats. But white people didn't like that, burned the city down. Let me show you this picture. I don't know if you've seen. Look. So they got this thing about calling Black Lives Matter, burn, loot, and murder. But look at them smiling in the picture. Yeah. All right, we moving on, man. We gonna wrap it up on this one, man. This is the August 14th, 1908 Springfield Massacre, and we'll get to part 5, man. August 14, 1908 Springfield Massacre, 20th century, 1900. Oh, so they even doing this in the 1900 people. It's way past slavery. They doing this in the 1900s. Okay, the Springfield Massacre traditionally called the Springfield Race Riot of 1908, was committed against African Americans by a mob of about 5,000 white people in Springfield, Illinois, between August 14th to 16th, 1908. Springfield Massacre, source chronicling Illinois. African Americans were killed and their homes and businesses were burned to the ground, as described at blackpast.org. Some Springfield blacks fought back in self defense. They shot back when fired upon, and the first victim of the lynch mob, Scott Burton, used his shotgun in an attempt to save his life and home. The second victim lynched was an 84-year-old cobbler named William Dunnigan, whose reputation had been tainted in the eyes of the mob by the fact that he had been married to a white woman for over 30 years. When the carnage finally ended, six black people were shot and killed, two were lynched, and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of property destroyed. About 2,000 black people were driven out of the city of Springfield as a result of the riot. This event was one of the catalysts for the formation of the NAACP, as described in this NPR story, uncovering and commemorating Springfield's 1908 race riot. In sundown towns, hidden dimensions of American racism, James Lowen says that the massacre had an effect on other communities in Illinois. The Springfield riot stands as a prototype for the many smaller riots that left communities all white between 1890 and 1940, most of which had never been written about by any historian. Indeed, the Springfield riot itself spawned a host of imitators. White shouted, "Give 'em Springfield," during attacks on African Americans. The Illinois State Register reported at Auburn, Thayer, Verdun, Garden, Pawnee, Spalding, Buffalo, Riverton, Pana, Edinburgh, Taylorville, Pleasant Plains, and a score of other places in central Illinois. A Negro is an unwelcome visitor and is soon informed he must not remain in the town. Buffalo, a little town 12 miles east of Springfield, became all white on August 17th, 1908, 2 days after the National Guard ended the Springfield riot. Not to be outdone by Springfield, whites in Buffalo posted the following ultimatum at the train station: all N words are warned out of town by Monday, 12 p.m., 12 m sharp. Buffalo sharpshooters. Teach outside the textbook about the legacy of Springfield and related events in Tulsa, Memphis, Rosewood, Slocum, and beyond. Read Burning Tulsa, The Legacy of Black Dispossession by Linda Christensen of Rethinking Schools. Springfield was one of the countless massacres in U.S. history. All right, man. Thank y'all for watching this video, man. Watching this live and thriving. You know what I'm saying? We're going to rock out for a few seconds on this music, though. I might even read another one. Go to the next page, man. Just want y'all to know that all this has been going on for quite some time, and now we're bringing light to it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I ain't even done yet, man. So yeah, we're gonna when we come back, we're gonna read the Slocum Massacre. Yeah, we're gonna get into this. This is a good one right here, man. The Slocum, Texas Massacre. All right. Until then, my friend, we're gonna rock out. Yeah, cold as blue color. You might not motherfucker catch me in your telescope, but I'm up close. Yeah, man, I ain't got a boast. I hold it down. I'm a magnificent host. When it comes to your coast, you know that's roast, not pork. Man, shit, yeah, hold it down. The fourth man, shit, I got the torch. Man, shit, you know I'm a stork. Old baby, I dropped it on me. Big thing crazy. Microphone, I hold it. You know, man, they can't knock. No, 27. Thank y'all for listening. We about to get it going. Let's start the engine. The competition already know they lagging. We out here, dog. There's no boasting and bragging. Let's go ahead. Celebrate on my freakness. Let me speak with eloquence and sequence. Not distinct, man, dog shit. Distinguish. That's fire blaze, but hey, left in a maze. Yeah, tired of the corn, man, shit, Native American. What I'm saying, dog, man, this is that pelican by the Gulf, man. Don't have to motherfucking show you how I'm post, but giving you the poke, part of the seed. Man, we grow, dog, nourishment. You know that I'm encouraging my people to go hard for what they want every day, yo. Getting it, man, shit. Let me take my time before I overdose, man, off this cataclysmic line. Yeah, man, put it on a man like this and that. Motherfucker from the hood, dog, still aristocrat. Man, shit, grew from a pauper to a motherfucker who got poppers. Man, shit, yeah, a showstopper. Man, shit, might as well cop me a house. Man, shit, flip the land and turn that to a fucking whole arena. Let the people know that I'm glimmering, dog, from the get-go. Man, shit, though. Man, shit, talking about gas, man, and petrol. Motherfucker really on my grind by the mileage. Styling, everything, dog. We ain't wildin' unless you talk about outside, man, through the trees. The forest, man, shit, we just like to sniff the breeze. Yeah, man, shit, relinquish stress. No need for that, dog. On my treasure chest. Aqua, Fina. Man, shit, you know that we do it like this. Damn, Gina. Yeah, shit, I wish you was a genie. But hey, I'm still gonna make my goals happy because I'm motivated, man. Shit, interactive. Satisfaction what you get when you listen to No 27, dog. That's on your wish list. Anyway, we can relinquish all that hate for my people, dog. I hope we don't kill each other, dog. Just put your fucking set on the state map. We don't take naps, dog. Shit, we active all day, man. Shit, man. You show you. They'll you. That's money for you. You can have it all day if you wish. No 27. Thank y'all for listening. I'm out this.
Hey, man.
Thank y'all for listening. Thank y'all for listening. I said, thank y'all for listening.